lecture, we will talk about the relationship between the organization and the environment in which it operates. The module about organization helps us in understanding which are the different variables, dimensions, and criteria that we should use to design an organization. But of course, it is impossible to create the one best way organization that can be suitable to any context, as it can happen that very different organizations can be equally effective in achieving specific goals. On the other hand, organizational choices that are successful in a certain context may not work in other contexts. The typical example of this is represented by the difficulties that Western companies of the automotive industry experienced when they tried to imitate for the first time the lean organization of their Japanese competitors. Truth is that every organization is affected by the environment, and the ability of the organization to create value does not depend only by the organizational design choices, but also from the coherency between what we can call contingency variables and the organization overall characteristics. In particular, the organization is affected by the following contingent factors. First, the external environmental factors that refer to the socio-economic context, the industry context, and the market context in which the organization operates. Second, the technological factors that refer to the industrial and information communication technologies used and available for the organization. Third, the strategic factors that are related to the strategy implemented by the company. And fourth, the demographic factors that refer in particular to the size of the organization, the age of the organization, and the maturity of the organization in its life cycle. Environmental and technological factors are external factors, since they cannot be just partially controlled or not controlled at all by the organization, while strategy and demographic factors are internal factors, because they can be more controlled by the organization and the management. Let's spend a few words about these four categories. About the environmental factors, we need to particularly focus on first the socio-economic context. Think about multinational companies that have branches all over the world. They continuously have to adapt the peripheral organizations to the local communities and their characteristics. Laws and regulation here play a fundamental role. Think about, for example, regulations in terms of human resource management and salaries that are different with different macro-geographical areas of the world. Also, cultural factors related to the local environment may affect the organizational design in terms, for example, of delegation or hierarchical orientation of the company. Also, the industry and the target market is another very important environmental factor. The competition, the distribution channels, the final demand are all factors that of course affect the organization and its choices. There are two dimensions that determine the characteristics of the external environment. Uncertainty level, which is the rate of environmental change and the difficulty to forecast the change, and the complexity level, that is the variety of the different aspects and the relevant information that is needed to describe a specific environment. Different levels of uncertainty and complexity impacts on the degree of flexibility and formalization that the organization should have in order to be effective in that specific environment. About the technological factors, we must say that technology has always impacted significantly organizations. Think about how mechanic technological improvements have changed, for example, the production systems, how, for example, the ERP systems change the planning and the organization of the production, or how the information technology has changed the working routines of members of the organization. Technology and organization are in a complex relationship that we define as co-evolution. Technology affects organization, but also cultural and societal factors affect the technological evolution and the technological choices in an organization. We have three main types of technology. Industrial technology, used to produce goods. Service technology, used to produce and deliver services. And information and communication technologies that support the business process and the vertical and horizontal exchange of information. About the strategic factors, we have evidences of the fact that the strategy of a company affects its organizational choices. The mission, the targeted competitive advantage and in general the corporate strategy may bring to different organizational settings. For example, if the goal is efficiency and reduction of cost, management can decide to put in place a functional structure. If instead the goal is effectiveness, with the need to improve the service level and the capability of customization toward the final customers, management can decide to put in place a divisional organizational structure. Also, the internal or external focus of the strategy can bring to different organizational choices. On one hand, we can focus more on external performance, such as the position in the market and the customer needs. On the other hand, the focus could be more on the internal aspects, paying more attention to the well-being of the members of the organization. Different focuses brings to different organizational choices. Therefore, also in this case, we can say that the link between strategy and organization is not univocal, since the two dimensions affect each other. Finally, about the demographic factors, we can say that the organization is affected by its size, its age, and its stage in the life cycle. On one hand, small companies show in fact a simple structure, informal coordination, and a strong focus on the business goals. Big organizations, instead, usually pursue the advantages of economy of scale through specialization and a functional structure. On the other hand, the age and the stage of the life cycle imply changes in the coordination mechanism and in the overall structure. Based on its growth and its maturity, the organization needs to put in place different levels of specialization and coordination.